now come on to considerations for coaches. So this is where I mentioned the slide from Kirsty Elliott-Sale's paper. I have stuck on here, and you might have to get your face quite close to your screen in order to actually read some of the text. It is on, obviously, an A4 page on a PDF online if you go to Google Scholar, so it's easy to access. But what that does really is, if you're looking at the female menstrual cycle, what it covers is sort of different phases, and so you've got hormone level variations, physiological and psychological changes, the effect on training at the 4 or 5 weeks of a cycle, and then you might have a look at what type of exercise you do. So the focus basically looks at whether you're looking at aerobic exercise, strength training, recovery, rest, that kind of thing. So you can use it for your own usage. There are some exercise apps that do actually sort of schedule exercise based on your cycle as well. So this is probably where some of this data comes into those algorithms and exercise programs. And you know, there's no one size fits all for female. There's lots of considerations to consider for men that coach women and women that coach women as well. But there are differences in our bodies, obviously, physiologically. Our anatomy is different, our endocrine systems are different. For women, it can be different if you're on contraception versus not. And there's also psychological variations, so a much bigger picture of what's going on in someone's life can influence sporting performance and training ability as well. And the other thing to mention also is breast health as well. So that comes down to things like size, hormone influence, sports bras. Sports bras are a massive topic. I mean, there's a lot of women that are probably wearing the wrong bras. And actually the influence of hormones on breast health, generally, you know, you might venture into breast cancers as well, but generally speaking, the loading of that tissue through exercise, running, higher intensity exercise is also something to be aware of. So differences do need to be considered, particularly with strength and conditioning programs as well. Another factor as well, children and teens, if they are part of a training group, running or otherwise, are not many adults, and women are not small men. So when you look at things like the female's absolute whole body strength, so a 1 rep max, we lie about 60 to 63.5% of a man's absolute strength. For upper body strength, we're about 55% of a male, and for lower limb, you're looking at about 72% as well. So training is going to be different, men versus women, and then throughout menstrual cycles versus not, if you're on contraception. And a lot of the training considerations really perhaps need to start looking at, you know, women in the menstrual years, with and without contraception, pregnancy, postnatal, physiological changes, perimenopause, and then into that postmenopause, whether women are on HRT or not as well. So that leaves quite a lot of things to think about in terms of how training schedules, programs are structured, particularly if they're group ones as well. I know from going down to the paces at the track, you know, everyone is doing the same track session, but there will be women there who will be at different stages of their cycles, different symptoms, different injuries, niggles and things. So maybe one size doesn't always fit all with a training program. The other thing to mention on the postnatal women is, if you haven't seen it already online, to Google the Return to Running guidelines. So there's a couple of women's health physios, Emma Brockwell and Grania Donnelly, who wrote them alongside a list of other professionals, and they are available as a PDF download. So when you're looking at return to running guidelines, they are guidelines, and the majority of them, because women's health research is somewhat lagging behind the rest of the world, There are some studies that have come from male studies, but they do give a foundation really for women who are looking to get back into running, whether that's recreational or to county level, race level, elite level, depending on what you do, who you are, and what elements really you want to look at in your physical ability to then progress on with a phase of rehab. So they're really good if you haven't come across them, because they really cover sort of a program really up to 12 weeks if you're looking at conditioning. So the prep really to get your body stronger, and then the requirements for 12 weeks plus. And then really everyone in those age groups needs to sort of consider some strength training and integrate strength training with running. I've come across a few people recently in clinic who run and perhaps don't really do quite enough strength training to balance the cardiovascular side of fitness as well. So that's where sometimes you can get a bit of dominance through certain exercise types, I guess, but sort of getting a balance with the mobility, Pilates, yoga, strength training, so more than body weight, perhaps with dumbbells, resistance bands, or heavier into your Olympic weightlifting, deadlifts, clean and presses, that sort of thing, where you're then looking to achieve greater strength gains as well. Those have, as we've mentioned, good physiological impact on the body for prevention of bone health issues, your osteopenias, osteoporosis. But particularly with running, just because you're doing strength training, it doesn't mean you're going to bulk up and your times will get slower. Often, if your conditioning is there, it will complement your cardiovascular training as well. So I will stop filling your ears with my sultry tones and just summarise really a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the main phases, or the only phases really, of female life stages. So you've got your menstrual cycle, your antenatal, which we haven't really covered too much, but postnatal time periods, perimenopause, postmenopause, and then the red S, energy disorders in sports considerations. The main things, if you're going to summarise from the last 55 minutes, is to track your cycles and symptoms if you're not on contraception. Establish your baseline energy requirements so you don't have to move into an energy deficiency with overtraining and therefore experiencing or potentially developing subsequent hormonal imbalance, and help your hormones as well. So adequate sleep, stress reduction, nutrition and gut health, hydration, and then movement, cardiovascular, mobility, and strength exercise.